All financial support for this podcast comes from my patrons on patreon.com. If you'd like to join in with the patrons, please check out patreon.com/DarwinGross. That's DarwinGrosse. Now enjoy the podcast. Okay, today I have the opportunity to speak with somebody that I reached out to because I really love her work. She has an album called Pineapple that has been kind of on constant play here at Casa de Darwin, but I've been listening to a lot of her work lately to get prepared for this interview, and I just love it. And so with no further ado, I would like to introduce you to Aimée Portioli. Hey, Aimée, how are you?
Hi, I'm well. Thank you so much for having me, Darwin. It's a pleasure.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking your time. Frankly, I felt like, in a way, our opportunity to talk was cursed. The first time we were planned to talk, I had an internet outage. And then today, I had my calendar goofed up, and we almost didn't get a chance to connect. So I'm really pleased that we were able to do it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, me too. And one time I had to go to Italy to play. So I thought, let's do this in a moment
That's right.
that my mind will be a little bit more ready for this. So thank you for waiting.
Sure, no worries. So let's start off by having you explain to the listeners a little bit about all the different things that you do in the world of audio and art.
Okay. Well, let's say if I want to put this simply, my last years, I'm focusing a lot on music production, so composing and producing. And at the same time, I'm working on my label. So these are, let's say, the things that I'm working on more since I moved in Berlin 5.5 years ago. Before that, I was living in Italy. I lived in Milan for 10 years. And after my studies, I started to work there for a radio station. And after that, I was more focused on producing music for media. So let's say I had this period of switching from production for media to give more space to my own creation. So this is something I'm working on more in the last year. So I had this switch that naturally happened somehow.
Right. Well, now I noticed that, that's about a time frame when your personal releases started coming out as the artist ID that you use is Grand River, right?
Yeah.
And that's when a lot of those releases started up. But I also, and what actually first caused me to reach out to you was your label One Instrument, which was such a cool concept. It really caught my attention and got me to reach out. So it's kind of interesting to see that you're both as an artist, you're working with other labels, but you also have this very specific label that you're putting together yourself.
Yeah, no, it's actually, it started as an experiment for myself. And also I kept going with it, and it evolved very naturally and slowly because I really like to work on one instrument like slowly and by giving it the right attention and also having a kind of relationship with the artist. So I'm really happy, with how things happened with one instrument. And it's a nice part of what I do because, I mean, it takes quite some effort and time. And
yeah, doing a label can be pretty tough, especially when it's one that has kind of a peculiar bent that's not specific to a genre. And that's what's interesting to me even about the label. It was really interesting when I first imagined it, and some of the first stuff I listened, it was like using synthesizers, especially you did a release that was just an MS-20, right? And
yes.
To me, so my head was sort of like, okay, that's what this label's about. And then the next one I flip on is like a vibraphone player. Yeah. I was just like, oh my God. I mean, that's really like taking it very much to an extreme, but it was also a really interesting twist.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's about creating tracks with one instrument, and it doesn't really matter which instrument it is. It's true. I made my own the very first track of the label I made myself with the MS-20, the original one. It was back then not even mine. I still don't have it because I have the mini version. But it was given to me for a long period. I had it in my studio back then because this person moved away from Berlin, so I had it there. And I thought, wow, I was thinking already before about this concept, so I chose that as the instrument to make the first track of the label with. So, and yeah, it was a really, really nice experiment for myself in the first place. Mm-hmm. Very interesting to see, like, what can I do when I sit with one instrument for a long time by restricting myself with a particular method. So that was the whole idea that was behind of this. Like,
right. Yeah, well, and I think it's one of those things that it's the kind of restriction that can be kind of a catalyst, can kind of push you into doing some interesting work. I really loved the stuff that I heard there.
Thank you so much.
So one of the things I really like doing in my podcast is talking to people about their background and how they got to be the artists that they are. And, you've already dropped a few hints about some of where you've gotten, but I'm kind of curious about, how'd you start? How did you get involved in music? How did you move into electronic music? What was the impetus behind that? And what were the things that affected your ear and made you do the kind of music that you do?
All right. Well, I think I have to start from the beginning here. So I grew up with my mom mostly, and she still is a huge music listener. So there was always music around the whole day. She had the radio on, or she would play records or go to concerts or listen to concerts on the television, things like that. So I was always surrounded by music all the time. And she still sings along with the songs she listens to. So I think that, like hearing music all the time and seeing someone that is passionate about listening was for me inspiring. It became part of my daily life since I was really little. So this was my mother. And then at the same time, I spent lots of time with my grandparents, and they were pretty religious people. So they went to church and they would take me to church with them. And there was this choir singing. Sometimes it was like a children's choir. And I was so fascinated by this that I said to my I was 5, and she told me the story several times. That I was 5 and I was with them in church listening to the choir, and I would say, "Grandma, this is so amazing. Can you please ask them for me to join them? I would love to be part of this choir too." So she went there, talked with the person responsible of the choir, and they said, "Well, you have to be 6 years old because you have to read the text, the lyrics. Otherwise, when you're 5, you're pretty much too young for that."
Right.
But she somehow managed to get me in the choir at 5. So I was 5, and I started to sing with this choir. And we had rehearsals, I don't know, 1 or 2 times per week, plus concerts all around. I was actually, back then I did not live in Italy because I lived the first 12 years of my life in Holland. So this was in Holland, and so we would travel with the bus, around Holland and sing in churches and venues. And so that was really fun. And the choir was always accompanied just by one piano. So one piano player. So it was just singing and one piano. And yeah, this was together with my mom listening to music at home, singing in the church, and was a big part of my need to, and my want to be involved with music. And then I remember, I was very passionate about music. So I asked as a Christmas present, I would ask a little keyboard or a toy drum, these toy instruments. So I had these small little keyboards, and I had a karaoke set, and I had this drum set and a toy guitar. And I remember my grandmother, she would like to, she also was always listening to to church music at home, and she would sing along with this church music. And she had this little book with lyrics. So there was it's like a little church book with songs, religious songs, and on the first page of each song was the sheet music of just the vocal part.
Oh, yes, right.
And so she would sing this song, and I would follow her with my little toy keyboard. And somehow I remember I was trying to understand how this sheet music would work. So I was understanding how the notes on the would correspond to the keys. So this was very interesting. So this happened. I don't know. I think I was maybe 7 or 8 or 9.
Wow.
While I was still singing, so we would sing a lot, and yeah, this was a huge part of how I grew up. And music has been always there every day, and I really wanted to play music. I was always asking my parents, like, "Oh, I would love to play the guitar now," and so I started to have guitar lessons. When I would see someone playing, I had a cousin, he would play guitar, and when he would play, I was looking at him very fascinated by that.
Mm-hmm. So at some point, though, I mean, your music is not church choir music. At some point, you took on new influences. And what were some of the things that stick out as like early musical influences for you in electronic terms?
In electronic terms, wow, that's a difficult question to answer because. So you mean which influences from an early age are still there now in my music?
No, more like your early influence was your grandmother in church music, and and then the music that was floating around their house that your mom listened to, right?
Yeah, she was listening to more like pop rock music.
Okay, yeah,
yeah. So big Rolling Stones fan.
Oh, really?
Like
okay.
That.
What is it that? Because you do some pretty abstract music sometimes.
Yes.
Some of your music is very spacey. Some of it is very ambient and beautiful. Some of it is very sequenced and tight. There are many different kinds of influences that I would guess, but I'm wondering more, I mean, what is it that you heard that made you move, or what is it that you experienced that made you move into electronic music?
Well, this switch from more acoustic music, because actually, like after this whole church period, let's call it like that, and listening to the music my mother would listen to, I started to listen more to rock music when I was around 11. So I was big rock music listener. So, and I played guitar. So that then began my period of playing in bands. So I started to play in a band. I would sing and play the guitar. And I did that for some years. When I did that, actually, at some point, so I was writing songs. And then I was playing the acoustic guitar. And I just wanted actually to record my own songs at home. I remember my parents had this old computer, I don't know, like Windows 98 or something, with these big towers. How do you call them?
Oh, yeah, right. Like, computer towers, right.
Yeah, and I remember, and with these big screens and all, and I thought, wow, yeah, I could try to record my song here, but I had no clue on how to do that. So I would just go directly with a jack cable from my guitar into the audio input of the computer. And I remember, I don't know the name anymore, but there was a little program inside the computer where you could record something with, like you could record audio with. That was actually my first approach to moving from playing to recording. And when I was recording, I saw, oh wow, you can reverse things, you can put things on the grid. So, and then I thought, wow, this is interesting. I can add reverb. Wow, this is fun. And I started to just play around with it. And I had absolutely no clue. Plus, everything was super noisy because there was no audio card. I was just with my cable directly into but my audio jack directly into their computer. And so this was actually when I started to be more interested in electronic music. And it was around I think 97, 98, around that years, when I just moved to Italy, and I was 12 years old,
Okay.
13 years old. And so I continued to play my songs because I was still into this acoustic folk rock period, and I tried to combine them with more electronic instruments. So I had a drum machine at some point, and I tried just to create some beats and play my acoustic guitar upon that. So I must say that where I am now is happened very, very slowly.
Right.
It was a very, very slowly switch. Like it took me years and years and years, because I was a big listener of other genres back then, and I was not a big electronic music fan back then. I wasn't at all, and I still now I listen to lots of different things. So yeah, I think it happened very slowly, and I am very interested in research. So maybe the fact that I wanted to research more with my instruments that I had, and I didn't go to like an audio school or something, so I was just experimenting, and I was just seeing, oh, what can I do with that? What can I do with this? And just trying on my own to figure it out. I kind of still have that approach. Somehow, when I have an instrument, I try to experiment with it and try to work with it maybe in my own way sometimes, especially when you were talking about some tracks that are more abstract. I really like to manipulate the sounds that maybe I record Foley wise, or with an acoustic instrument, or with the synthesizer. I really like to work with that content.
Well, that really actually comes through with some of your releases. The thing that you did on one instrument that is called the Rosenbach acoustic piano.
Yes.
That was actually kind of surprising, because the name of it, you think you're going to hear an acoustic piano, but it's actually a very sound designerly kind of construct, using both the sound of the piano, but also the sound of the piano is like raw material for manipulation. And it's really clear that you take your own approach to this, rather than sort of like following any genre lines. And maybe that's why I was really drawn to your music, because it didn't seem to follow a really specific thing. So I would start listening, and all of a sudden I'd be like, well, this really reminds me of Tangerine Dream a lot. And then it all of a sudden switched, and like, well, that's not like Tangerine Dream at all, but it's like something else. And it was like such an interesting blend that I found it very compelling from that standpoint. Now, I'm a little curious. I'm fascinated by this idea of you being drawn into the church choir at such a young age, because not only did that fill you with a musical life, but it also gave you an early sense of a life that is done where you perform in front of an audience.
Yes.
Right?
That's true.
And to what extent, I know that you actually perform a lot. I saw that you were, you just mentioned you had been in Italy doing a performance. You were at Mutech, and you've done a lot of really interesting and great kind of large form performances. To what extent do you enjoy performing, or do you prefer more of a recording focus?
I enjoy performing a lot. I really love it. I mean, I think it's a very important moment to share music with people and to be able to meet the people. That for me is so important, to see their faces and the reactions, and to also understand and see how crowds are in different countries, in different venues. I really, really like it. Sometimes when I come back, I'm like, yes, now I have 2 weeks to be at home, to be in the studio. But it gives me so much inspiration and positivity that I love it. And it's a special and important moment. And I'm very, very grateful that I always got the chance to do since I was little. And it's true, actually, what you say, that even if I was standing there with other people singing in a choir, I was still performing for an audience. And that kind of emotion that you get is very, very special. And of course, I love absolutely to spend time in my studio because that's so important to do that. Because if I would not, then I would not have the time and the possibility to create the music that I do. And I need time and to do that, to research. And I cannot really create music when I know that I only have 3 hours, or I cannot even create music when I know that the day after I have to leave. So I need extended periods of time to completely immerse myself into composition. At least, I mean, if I know that I have an entire week or 2 weeks that I can lock myself up in the studio, I love that feeling. And, but on the other side, when I'm home for a month or two, and then I'm like, oh my God, I need to get out of here. I need to go somewhere. I need to travel I really need this balance in my life. That's very important to me.
So right now we're in the middle of this COVID-19 sort of lockdown, which means that there's not a lot of performances happening. There's not a lot of opportunity to go out to clubs and see other people's work, which is, I know, for all of us as artists, that's an important thing too, is to go and experience other people's work. Seeing the boundaries constantly being pushed is an important thing that's kind of been cut out for us. How are you coping with that? Or what are you finding as sort of like a replacement for that?
I'm trying to cope with it, let's say, because I still have not found the way of coping with it in the right way, maybe because I find it really hard and it makes me really sad. Mm-hmm. I have some moments that when I talk about, like today I had a lunch with someone and we were talking about this, and when I talk about it a lot, I get really sad because of course you confront yourself more with what's going on.
Right.
So it's really weird. It's a very weird year. I'm happy that I got the chance to play. Actually, in September, I had 2 gigs, and in October, I had 1 gig, which is kind of weird.
Kind of rare, yeah.
Really rare. I had some friends that they were like, how is this even possible? And let's say that by playing ambient experimental music, people can sit down. I mean, I don't play club music, so this is maybe a plus for this period, for this weird period. So I'm lucky that I have this possibility to play for people, even if they can sit. I mean, they would already sit or lie before this pandemic. And I have had some places where people, like in the venues, they would put cushions or where people would lie down. And I really like that concept. But yeah, so it's really weird. It's sad. I try to not think. When I think about it too much, I try to focus on the positive things that are happening. And I really miss, as you said, also going to concerts and performances of other artists, because it's such a big part of my life. I used to go a lot, and every time I go, then I come home and I feel refreshed. I feel inspired.
Yeah.
I feel, and it's not the same thing. I mean, it's nice. Of course, we can watch things online and we can listen to music online, but seeing a live performance, it's not really replaceable.
I think, and it's not only interacting with the music, but it's also interacting and feeling like you have a connection with the performers that you see. Even if you don't meet them, you still feel like you have a connection with them because you were part of the experience of a performance. And I think that that's something that just doesn't get duplicated by like Zoom performances or whatever.
No, absolutely not. I mean, there are some tiny concerts still happening here in Berlin, and I with reduced capacity, of course, and I am attending some places. I've been to a nice concert lately, and I will go next week if things won't be canceled again, because you never know. Every day,
you never know.
Things are changing. Yeah, you never know. So I'm trying to, of course, responsibly handle these things, like going and adapt to this situation. But so I did not find any replacement to answer your question for that, because I don't think there is an actual replacement. What I just can do, the only thing that I tell myself every day is I'm just trying to use this time that I have extra. Let's call it like that now, that because I have more time to be at home. I'm not traveling much.
Right.
Lately, I was actually also supposed to go visit my parents this week, but I didn't go because of this whole situation. They said, well, it's better not to, because here things are quite complicated. So I have extra time now, and I'm trying to focus that time and to take that time and just focus on music. And I think that's the best thing that I can do right now to create and to research. I mean, even if one day I will just play without having a specific idea about what, I mean, everything is useful when you work in a studio, even if you're not really realizing that. And maybe, at the end of the day, you say, oh, wow, I'm not sure what I did today, but then at the end, when you come back to it another time, I have that sometimes that I think, oh, wow, yeah, that was useful. Or just listening to records or recording podcasts. I mean, I'm trying to invest my time and to not waste my time. I'm trying. Right. I mean, I'm always quite practical, trying to be practical with my time. So I'm trying to organize it as best as I can. So yeah, this is what I'm doing lately.
Sure. Now, you said before you moved to Berlin that you were involved in audio for media and stuff like that. What kind of work were you doing then?
When I lived in Milan, after my studies, when I moved there, I went there because I went to college. And after college, I started to work for a radio station.
Okay.
Where I was an audio engineer there. I was recording, editing, mounting audio. So that was a really, really nice period of my life. I worked there for 3 years and I learned a lot, like really, really a lot of things. And this actually also, I forgot when you asked me before, like how I switched to electronic music, also working in a radio and, using so many tools that I had at my disposal back then helped me to get where I am now. And I learned so much that, I mean, every little thing we are surrounded by influences us somehow. Right. So that was also a very, very big part of the electronic part. But yeah, your question was another one. Your question was what I was doing for the media. So I worked at the radio station, and besides working for these transmissions that I was working as an audio engineer, my boss back there, he was a voice artist. Is that the right word to say?
Yeah.
So he would record advertisement, or he would dub movies and all, because in Italy they still do dubbing, Mm-hmm. So, but he did lots of advertisement. So thanks to him, I started to work with advertisement because I would record him. And I was already, of course, I was producing music, and from one thing, it leads into another. And I managed to make some music for advertisement. I did some video games, but actually not so much. I did more video games the first years that I moved to Berlin. I did some audio work for fashion shows. Milan is a big city for fashion. Right. Some animation, sound design and composition for animation. I made some tracks for a movie, for TV shows, stuff like that. So that's what I was doing, yeah.
Yeah, so what's interesting to me is before you said that in order to get work done, you need to have like extended periods of time. But doing that, I was curious when you said the audio for media because, there's one set of jobs that's like the technical jobs, what you talked about with the work that you did for broadcast and stuff like that. But also when you get into creative stuff like composing for video games or composing for advertising, a lot of times that very much is like working to the clock. I need this amount of stuff by Thursday.
Absolutely.
How did you cope with that?
Well, I think maybe it's interesting you ask, because I actually never realized it, but I think my desire of wanting extended time to produce my own music came as a response to that, because I remember
how that felt, huh?
Yeah, because it was really stressful. I mean, I remember people would call you and they wanted changes like right away, or have something for within 2 hours. Yeah, it was crazy, and it was a lot of pressure and stress. And actually, this is also a reason why I stepped back a bit from that. Mm-hmm. Especially advertisement. I think advertisement is quite stressful environment because everything goes very quickly.
Right. That is interesting though, and I can see where that would be influential in terms of making you want to just slow things down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, of course, when you make your own music, you want to give the best always. Of course, also when you do something for someone else, you want to give your best, but you know your time is limited, so you have to
Right.
give the best of yourself within
Within
a
those
short period of time.
parameters, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
but if it's like now, I could decide, okay, now I want to work on a new album and I want to research something specific. It would be weird to put a time limit on that, on a
Mm.
research, you know. So I see this very differently, and I approach these two things, yeah, very differently somehow.
It's interesting you put it that way because I actually recently I had decided I was going to try and do a release, and I was like, by the end of summer, I'm going to have a release ready. And it was a horrible experience for some reason. Like
Okay.
having to work to that I just wasn't enjoying it all of a sudden.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I think that what you're expressing is some of what I was feeling, which is
Yeah.
I was really at a point where I needed to research. I needed to like take certain instruments and spend more
Yes.
time instead of getting what the instrument gave me, getting in there and getting what I wanted out of the instrument.
Yes.
And it
Yeah.
was, in the end, my desire to do something that was more useful kind of thwarted the idea of getting it done by a certain day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I hadn't really thought about it as much more other than a failure before now, but maybe I could feel better about myself.
No,
Maybe.
absolutely. I don't think it's yeah, I don't think it's a failure at all. I mean, we need time to I mean, music for me, especially when I create my own music, where I don't I mean, when you make something for a client, often, I mean, you get a brief, so it's like you have to be creative within certain limits.
Hmm.
Unless it's a soundtrack where they say, yeah, just I don't know, make a piece how you like it for this part, but I mean that doesn't happen very often. So I consider making music for myself, I mean for my own project, as a way of to be able to express with freedom what I want to express, because for me it's about emotion, and I need to, if I want to convey that emotion, I mean it needs time. It's not possible to put it in a box and say, hey, I need to create 8 tracks within 2 months. I mean, for me, that really doesn't work. Maybe it could work, of course, because I could put my schedule on it and do, but I don't know if it would feel right.
Right.
I don't do that. Yeah, I don't do that usually. I mean,
Yeah.
of course, sometimes when there are some deadlines to do, but then usually when I have a deadline, I would start immediately. Like when I get asked to do something which I want to do, I start immediately, which gives me more time. So I would not keep it for the end.
Right.
I never do that because I know myself, and I mean, maybe I would make something and then after 1 week, like trash it completely, you know, and then start all over. So I would need more time. Often I would ask, please, can I have more time, because I'm not satisfied. And
Oftentimes people are okay when you approach it that way. If you're like, I want to do my best work, people are like, okay, take your time then. Right.
yeah, well, that's, yeah, if it's possible. I
If
mean,
it's possible.
other people might approach it in a different way. I have a very dear friend, and he's like super strict with himself, and he can't really like say, now I'm going to make 5 tracks in a week or something. But I really have no idea how people would do that.
Right.
I just can't. It's not my thing. It's not my
Sure.
thing.
So when you talk about doing for your own work, doing research, what does research mean? Is it listening to certain kinds of artists? Is it exploring a certain machine? Is it reading up on the history of a certain kind of music? Is it reading a novel and getting influence from that? What is research for you?
Okay. Well, first it depends what I want to research, of course. Lately, I'm researching what kind of tracks I want to make for a next release and what particular sound I want them to have. I also see sometimes that I always have this thing like, how do I want to perform these tracks live? So I'm lately a bit confused about do I want to, I know you talked about this also in another podcast that I was listening to of yours about this, this whole, how do you play your tracks live and how do you approach that, which is always a big part of a composition and how to perform that. So I would love actually now to make something that is also playable live without having to compromise so much. So this is what I'm researching right now. How am I doing this? I'm watching tutorials of several instruments that might be interesting to play live that I don't have, because maybe I have two things that are not usable to take. Maybe I'm actually studying, I'm looking up some synthesizers that are easier to rent when I play in a place.
Right.
So I'm trying to find a little balance here. So this is what I'm researching now. Another thing that really helps when I want to get inspired is, of course, listening to other music. But yeah, I mean, also reading or just having a walk in nature for me can be equally inspiring, but it's not easy to say how that immediately can be transferred into music. So that's always another thing. But as I said before, like for me, music is about the emotion that gives me while I'm making it. And then if I don't feel the emotion while I'm making it, for me, it's hard to continue developing it. So it's not easy to say what is inspiring me right now or what is not, because everything around us inspires us daily. And I think research is part of the inspiration tool sometimes. I mean, sometimes we don't even know what inspires us, and then can be part of the research. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. Now, one of the things that's interesting to me, though, is your approach to this is kind of unique, because an awful lot of people who are doing electronic music, the work that they do in the studio is still pretty improvisational and still is pretty ephemeral. They'll do a thing and kind of launch it out into the world. Luckily, the recorder was on, because they'll capture it and go. For you, you're actually... I almost think of it as like capital C composition, which is that you're doing a composition, but also with the idea that that same thing is going to be able to be presented live. I actually think that's interesting, but that's a powerful concept. And it's one that I'm seeing more artists now coming to the point of realizing its importance. It's important to, when you do a composition, not only be able to do it once, but be able to have it be at least a launching point for a live performance.
Yeah. And actually, I did not do this before, because
Really?
the tracks the tracks of Pineapple, of Crescente, and of my latest album, I did not think about, how am I going to perform these tracks live? I was just making them. So this is something I'm researching now, to come back to the research part. This is something that I'm really interested in, but it's not easy, because if you want to play something exactly or more or less in the way you made, that's how it is on the record, maybe that content has to be a bit more minimal. That's what I'm understanding right now. And that is not always my case, because I have some tracks that are more minimal, and others, they are completely maximal. So
yeah, no kidding.
I'm not sure like what the right balance is.
Well, and you do a lot of stuff that's like heavily processed. Audio processing seems to be a big part of what your music is dependent upon, and it strikes me that that's a little difficult to just sort of like drop into a live scenario, because so often it's very very tweaky interactions with effects processors can make a huge difference, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I do that with some outboard things that I have, and I cannot bring these things live. So another way would be create a live performance that is not related to a record. Right. So these are the things that I'm thinking about lately. Maybe I have more time lately, so I'm trying to think of different options. And I'm reading about, actually, I bought a book. It's about, I want to know more about emotions. I said this also earlier, and I want to understand more how emotions are made. There is this book, it's called How Emotions Are Made, and maybe it's not related to music, but I don't know, I'm trying different approaches lately to see what will happen next. And I'm curious to see like how taking some time to work. For example, I now have my acoustic piano here finally, because I had a piano in Italy, but I was unable to bring it here because of size and all.
Yeah, right.
So it was quite expensive. It was really, really expensive to bring it here. But finally, since January, I have another piano. So I'm working a lot with acoustic instruments, combining the acoustic instruments together with electronic instruments and finding a balance between the two of them, because I really, really love the integration between electronic and acoustic. And I think already some of this it's present on my latest album more than on Pineapple. And this is something that I'm working on lately.
Okay. Well, now it's funny because when we talk about your research and we talk about some of the music that you've done on your releases, it having the potential for being kind of maximal, we talk about being really open and having a lot of freedom in terms of defining your limits. But then we come back to your label, One Instrument, and that has right out of the box, that has a limit, which what you're going to work on is you're going to work with one instrument. Now, in doing that, you still maintain allowances for multi-tracking and overdubbing and use of effects and all that kind of stuff.
Reverb.
It's really supposed to be a study. Yeah, it's really supposed to be a study of a specific sound generating instrument, right?
Yes, exactly. The way the reason why I came up with this restriction was because I came up with this idea in 2016, and I was working in the studio. I was recording things. I was trying to make some tracks, and I've always been lucky that I had quite some synthesizers, and I was moving too quickly from one synthesizer to the other.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, when you start and you say, oh, well, let's try with this synthesizer today. And then you end up not being happy after an hour. What do? You go to another one, or you start adding effects or whatnot. And I thought, wow, this is not going anywhere. What am I doing here? And I said, why am I not patient enough to sit longer with one instrument without adding effects or without doing this or that? So that's why I came up with these guidelines that are, as you said, the only effect possible is reverb, because if I would take out the reverb, everything would sound super dry. So I thought maybe reverb is a good thing to keep, and multi-layering is effect, equalization, compression. I mean, you can build things on a grid, which is already a big tool. If you think about that, it's a big possibility you have when you can edit and you can cut and put things on the grid and record. But sampling is not allowed. And I mean, there is a document that I made that people can download with these guidelines when they decide to make a track. And it was more of a need that I felt for myself. So, and I found it very interesting to make something like freely, like getting back to the freedom part, but within some restrictions. And that was very, very interesting.
Well, and the artists that you brought in, so you have a number of compilation albums that are just kind of labeled by the year that they were done. And it was really kind of amazing when I would just go through and look at what people were using as their one instrument, right? Some of them were as like wide open as like Max MSP is my one instrument. And other people were so narrow that they were using like a mutable instruments braids, right?
Yes.
Or a single depth for VCO. It was really kind of surprising. And then you would get people who would use a violin and another person who would use an old Krumar synth. And it was amazing because when I would look at the track lists, I would be like, oh, this is going to be all over the map. But then when I actually listened to it, it was curated. And, this is props to you for the way that you curated, but also the way that you would sequence things in an album. It had just a really nice flow, and it just seemed to really work to me.
Well, I'm happy you say that. It makes me very happy because these compilations, the divided by year, these are the tracks, the experiments that are uploaded every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks on SoundCloud and
Okay.
Bandcamp. So because this is how it all started. It started actually just as an experiment platform where people could make a track with one instrument, and it was not even a label in the beginning. It was just a
Just
platform
an
where
idea, right?
an idea where you could I wanted to share this idea with other people, and other people wanted to participate. So it was more like an experimental platform. And then after 1 year there were like 24 tracks, because I was pretty every 2 weeks I would upload a track. So in the end, there were 24 tracks, and people would ask me, like, where can I buy this? And I said, oh, wow, I have no idea. They're not for sale, actually. They're just there for
Right.
you to listen to. After a bit, people would ask me, like, why is there not a vinyl release coming up or something? So in time, slowly, I started to think of it more as a label. But that was not the initial idea. It was more a possibility for others to want to try something different that they would usually do in their studio. And that's actually still the thing that it's the motive of the label.
All
It's
right.
still that. I mean, it should be all about that, about the instrument, and trying to get as much as you can out of that instrument and maintaining the timbre of the instrument. That is why I ask people not to use delay or
Right.
distortion,
Right.
because timbre
That
would change
yeah,
too
that
much.
right, it crushes the timbre
Yeah.
difference, right?
Yes. So these were all these compilations, they still keep going. So every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, there is a new track that I upload on Bandcamp and SoundCloud, and they are for sale on Bandcamp. But these are just the digital releases. And on the side of that, I started with vinyl releases and tape releases. So these
Hmm.
are so they're like, there's the digital and then the physical
Right.
part that go parallelly. They are released. So yeah, it's a lot of work also because yeah, there are lots of artists. I mean, I don't know, it's 150 or something in the last 3-4 years that because in the beginning was I started around October 2016, so it's 3.5 years now. Yeah,
And
no, it's
how
four.
how do
Yeah.
how do people get involved in this then?
Well, in the beginning, it was me asking other
Uh-huh.
people, "Hey, would you like to participate?"
Right,
Because
right.
nobody knew about it, and so I would have some musician friends, and they would say, "I'm not so sure. What is this?
It sounds
You're
like how
so
I do my
strict."
podcast, so I understand that completely. Yeah.
And they would say, "Wow, what is this? Your guidelines are so strict." I mean, no, I don't want to do this, you know. But then at some point, I started to receive lots and lots of demos. Like a lot of people would send me demos. At some point, because I keep track of all the demos, so I listen to every demo. I always respond to everyone because I mean, I remember in the past I would contact labels myself and I would not
Right.
receive any answer. So I always felt kind of sad about that. So I try always to be as open as possible, and I respond to everyone. So I just create a dialogue with all the artists, and so I started to receive lots of demos. Sometimes there are things that are not compatible with the label, so I talk with them about it, and other times it's just perfect immediately. So it's really, really interesting also to see what instrument another person would choose, or how they would choose that instrument. I mean, it's really, really cool. It's really, really nice to do this. Yeah.
It's amazing. Well, unfortunately, our time is up. In fact, it was up a while ago, but it's
Okay.
this is
Well,
such a great conversation. I appreciate it. Before I let you go, though, what is coming up next? What are you working on now? Do you have any more performances planned? Do you have releases planned? And what's next up for the label?
okay. So for the label, there will be a release coming up on vinyl in the next, I think, 2 months, more or less. Everything got a bit slower now with the whole COVID
Right,
situation.
right.
But masters are ready. I'm waiting on the artwork. And so I think in 2 months, more or less, maybe three, the new release will be out. And I'm really looking forward to that. concerts, not really, because I was actually supposed to play soon, but it got canceled. And I mean, understandably, I don't know what we can expect this winter. And
Right.
lots of festivals where I was supposed to play last summer have been postponed to next summer. But so let's cross our fingers that things will be possible for next summer. And then, yeah, I will have things coming up in the future. I mean, this year, if everything goes as planned, I think I made a track for various artists, which I'm really looking forward to be out. And I worked on a remix, and I have an EP ready, and that will be out, I think, next year, I don't know when. Honestly, it's all a bit slow. And I'm working, as I said, on new material. But yeah, I'm trying to take the time to do it right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it has been fascinating to talk with you, to talk about how you come up with some of the ideas, how you plan out your work. It's really fascinating. I would suggest that everybody get out there and take a look at the work. It's again goes under the artist name Grand River. You'll find it where all your favorite music is found, and take the opportunity to listen to it. It caught me. I think it'll catch you too. Well, with that, we will say goodbye. Thank you so much, Aimée, for having this discussion. Thank you, Darwin.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Likewise. All right. Bye. Many thanks to Aimée for having that great chat, and for kind of opening the doors to some of her ideas behind research and the creation of work, and just the general thinking process behind making tracks. I found it really inspiring. Also, if you want to kind of get your head opened up, check out One Instruments at oneinstruments.bandcamp.com. To hear some of the amazing stuff that people did in this one instrument context. If you have any comments, complaints, concerns, questions, whatever, drop me a line, ddg@cycling74.com, darwin.gross@gmail.com, ddg@20objects.com. They'll all do. And with that, I will thank you again for listening and see you next time around. Remember, if you want to help support the podcast, please jump over to patreon.com/darwingross and join up. There's always some extras that come with your membership in my Patreon group. But otherwise, just thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing with your friends. And we'll talk to you next time around. Bye.